Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bruce Williams. You probably already knew that. I am the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, and it's our pleasure to be convening this listening session today with the candidates for the Victoria riding, all of whom are vying to get an office in that building that you're seeing on screen, right, or one close by anyway, when that building is back open for business as usual. I would like to begin today by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral territories of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. It's our privilege and pleasure to live and work alongside them every day. Would also like to make recognition of those celebrating Rosh Hashanah right now, the high holy days, and the approaching New Year in the Jewish calendar. So all the best to all of you. So we have lots to talk about today. We have a number of questions we're going to get through. This is a listening session. This is not going to be a typical debate format with rebuttals back and forth. We just want to make sure that you can get as much information as you possibly can from these candidates about their policies and their platform. So representing the federal NDP, the New Democratic Party, Laurel Collins. Nikki Lawton is the candidate for the Green Party. Nikki Mcdonald is the candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada. And Hannah Hodson joins us as the candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada. So you can see them. Now we're going to hear more about them. I would like to welcome each candidate to take 2 minutes at this point to give us a little introduction, tell us why you're running, why you feel you're the best candidate, and why your party best represents the interests of this region. Let's begin with Hannah Hodson, please. Hannah, you have 2 minutes and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today and for having us all. I think this is a great opportunity. I am running as a Conservative candidate because I believe that Erin O'Toole is the best candidate for Prime Minister and that Canada's recovery plan is the best plan to bring Canada and our region, our riding, out of the pandemic and into a brighter future. It's many parts of our platform to support business, but also support communities, because we know that you can't have a thriving business sector if you don't have thriving communities. And that's why I'm very proud of our Main Street Revitalization Plan, which will help small businesses access larger loans than the current level government provides, and higher tax credits in order to encourage investment into their business so that they can help to bridge this difficult period now so that we survive and thrive later, so we don't lose the character of the small businesses and on the South Island, because I think that gives so much to our community. And in terms of building communities, you know, one thing that I think is a huge problem, and I think everyone thinks is a huge problem here, is access to housing. We simply do not have access to affordable, accessible, and secure housing for enough people who want to live here and who want to work here. Finding employees is extremely difficult when no one can afford to live. And I think that that is incredibly important. And the Conservative platform commits to building 1 million homes across Canada over 3 years, banning foreign purchasers who just want to park money, and investing and working to incentivize purpose-built rental. That is what we need to do in order to make sure there are more places available for people to live. Protecting the environment, something I'm very passionate about, also helps greatly here on the South Island. And our plan to secure the environment will do just that. Love to talk about that more, but limited time. And mental health action plan, because I think that many people have seen the impact to our community from mental health, the lack of mental health resources, specifically around addictions and the opioid crisis.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah,
we're at 2 minutes there. Thank you very much. We can continue back on some of those topics a little bit later on. So that is Hannah Hodson, Conservative candidate for the Victoria riding. Next up, from the Green Party, Nick Lawton. Nick, go.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce, for having us all on here today. My name is Nick. I'm a former nanovaccine researcher turned law student at UVic. But I'm not running because of those things. I'm running because, quite frankly, I'm fed up with the status quo. The way things have gone in our country now for the last several decades have been, quite frankly, the wrong direction. Life is becoming increasingly unaffordable as the cost of living skyrockets while wages remain stagnant. Our healthcare system is broken, only better than that of the United States. And competing honestly with the United States on healthcare is a bit of a joke. And our climate. We have the worst climate record in the G7. And instead of fighting to lower emissions, we have a government that continues to increase both subsidies to fossil fuel corporations and raise emissions. It's time to get out of that 20th century mindset and into the clean, green economy by making investments in our future, how we can reimagine it, how we can fight for a future that we can all believe in. The new approach that we're going to make as Greens fighting for you in Ottawa will be to guarantee a decent job with a living wage, safe, secure, and affordable housing, a quality education, comprehensive, truly universal, head-to-toe, cradle-to-grave healthcare, security in unemployment, retirement, sickness, and disability, and a clean environment for everyone as human rights and not just privileges. Thanks so much for having me on today. I look forward to talking to you lots more about these important topics. And remember, vote green on September 20th. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Nick Lawton is the candidate for the Green Party in the riding of Victoria. Next up, representing the Federal New Democratic Party, Laurel Collins. Laurel, the floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Thanks so much, Bruce. And it's really great to be here. I'm zooming in from the homelands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. And over the past year and a half, we have been going through COVID-19. We've seen our community members struggling through this pandemic. We've also witnessed and uncovered thousands of unmarked graves at residential schools. You know, each one of those children had a name and a family. We have also witnessed record-breaking heat waves, extreme weather events, the smoke from climate fires. And the past few years have shown us very clearly that we need a prime minister that not only says the right things, but actually does the right things. We need a government that fulfills on its promises for clean drinking water, promises on climate action, promises on pharmacare, promises on the critical issues. We need elected officials who are going to fight for these important issues. And that is what you get when you send New Democrats to Ottawa. Members of Parliament who will fight for our communities, will fight for you, for families, for students, for small businesses, for seniors, for our communities and our future. And over the past 2 years, we have fought to increase supports for families, for small businesses, whether it was increasing CERB from 1,000 to 2,000 or increasing the wage subsidy from 10% to 75%, saving hundreds and thousands of jobs in small businesses, strengthening the net zero climate law. At every turn, we have fought for Canadians and we delivered. And under Jagmeet Singh, we have a bold, ambitious plan that makes life better for all Canadians. So I'm asking for your support to send me back to Ottawa so I can keep fighting for you and for a recovery that works for everyone.
Great, thank you. Laurel Collins, candidate for the New Democratic Party. And our fourth candidate today is the candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada, Nikki Mcdonald. Nikki, the floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And I want to acknowledge that I today am on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people. And also, Bruce, I want to thank you and the Chamber. As a member of the Chamber, I've really found it valuable to have these kind of sessions and also the great work that the Chamber and others have done through this pandemic to give us, I'm a small business owner myself, to give us the information that we need to help get through this pandemic. As we know, it's been a challenging and extraordinary time that we've been coming through. And over this past 2 years, what the Liberal government has done is put in place a plan that's helped our economy get through this pandemic by supporting people. And that's what you do during a pandemic, during crisis. Community supports people. And so there are 3 phases for the plan that the Liberals have put in place. The first was to prevent scarring, which is to say to put in the measures like CERB, like the wage subsidy, like small rent relief, to ensure that there wasn't such a significant scarring to our economy, bankruptcies, families going under, that when the recovery began, that we couldn't get back to work. And so that was the first phase that we're coming out of. The second phase is to focus on that economic recovery. And I was really proud to be part of the South Island Prosperity Recovery Task Force, which I know, Bruce, you were an active member of as well. When across this region, we came together as leaders in community, in government, to really say, how did we want our region to recover? And so that's the stage we're moving forward into. And then the third stage is to look at moving to a higher level of productivity. And in the Liberal platform, you'll see programs such as a Net Zero Accelerator, which is investing in new technologies, something that's so critical but so valuable for our community here, because we have in Victoria a unique ecosystem, innovative ecosystem that has the high-tech sector, has ocean tech, and has all sorts of amazing things that we can build on. And as
Thanks.
your MP, that's my plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. We're all done there. Thank you all very much. We're going to move in now to the question part of it. As we said, this is a listening session, so this is not a back and forth thing with any sort of rebuttals or anything like that. Each of you will have 1 minute to state your platform and your position on this. It falls under different categories, and we're involving some of our other partners in this event, the Vancouver Island Construction Association, the Urban Development Institute, Destination Greater Victoria, the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority, and the Downtown Victoria Business Association. So I'm going to give you a bit of a preamble to lead up to the question. Housing affordability we want to talk about first. Of course, one of the biggest issues we hear about is the rising cost of housing in the region. CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, speaks about something called a housing continuum, which is sort of a range of people from those experiencing homelessness to homeowners who are in the real estate market to gather those perspectives. We need to ensure that restaurant workers and teachers and frontline workers can live in the communities that they serve. Part of the solution involves investment in social housing and policies that help make rent and home ownership affordable. So our friends at the Vancouver Island Construction Association and UDI have come up with some stats for consideration. Construction employs about 7.5% of our GDP in this country, very significant. Construction, of course, will play a key role in growing our economy. So with that in mind, would you please give a bit of background on increasing infrastructure investment in this region? For 1 minute, let's begin with Nikki Mcdonald. Nikki.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And as you know, over the past, since 2015, the Liberal government got back into the business of housing. The federal government had not been involved in housing for many decades. And we felt this was absolutely critical to get back into investing in housing. As you said, all forms of housing, the continuum from social housing all the way through to ensuring we are creating housing for people to age in place. We introduced legislation that recognizes that access to housing is a right. And we have been putting behind that very innovative programs, one such as the Rapid Housing Initiative, which was designed through the pandemic to really help the province and municipalities build housing to address the need of those who are homeless in tents, for example, in Beacon Hill Park. We've also investing in an accelerated program that would work with municipalities to increase the diversity of housing that we have, because that's a big challenge in Victoria. Right now, we're building single family homes, we're building condos. We need to be building more townhomes, duplexes, low-rise apartments that are affordable so that people have places to live and places to own. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nikki, very much. Same question. Let's go to Laurel Collins, please. Laurel, 1 minute. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Bruce. And really, too many people are struggling in our city to make ends meet. And the cost of housing keeps going up and up and up. And so we need to tackle the housing crisis head on. We, as New Democrats, have committed to build, renovate, preserve 1.7 million homes, and ensuring that we are, we used to have a federal government in the 70s and 80s that built cooperative housing, built social nonprofit housing. We also need to make sure we are tackling some of the underlying root causes of our skyrocketing housing prices. We've committed to a 20% foreign buyers tax on top of what the province is doing, and tackling money laundering as well. We are going to build 500,000 new affordable units and make sure that we lift the GST on new builds that meet strict affordability criteria. We also, we need to make sure that we streamline the process and application processes for support from the federal government, and that we also invest in training and getting the expertise to ensure that we have people on the ground who are able to help us build these projects.
Thanks, Laurel. Appreciate it very much. Next up, same question to Nick. Nick, you have 1 minute.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I mean, housing is an incredibly complex issue. here in Victoria, but at its most basic, safe, secure, and affordable housing is a human right that we must guarantee to everyone. What we've had in the past is a lot of governments, federally, provincially, municipally, that have come up with a lot of plans and strategies for how to get this done. What we don't have is we don't have governments that are committed to sitting down at the table and making sure that the job actually gets done before they go back home and blame the other jurisdictions for the fact that they weren't able to follow through on their promises. The Trudeau government announced that rapid housing initiative, but Victoria didn't get funding for it. And that's because the Trudeau government didn't put us as a priority. What we need is we need to send a clear message to Ottawa that actually Victoria is a priority. And as one of the least affordable cities in this country, we must demand safe, secure, and affordable housing. Not just for low-wage workers, not just for people who are working in fast food, people who are working in other sectors, teachers, for example. We also need to demand that we are building the kind of culturally vibrant centers that the great European cities of this world have, like Paris and Barcelona, to have that sense of community that comes with having safe, secure, and affordable housing.
Nick, thank you very much. And Hannah, it is now over to you for 1 minute.
Thank you. We desperately need to make sure housing is more affordable, more accessible, and more secure. In our communities, you can see the terrible consequences when housing is not affordable, not accessible. One of the things we desperately need to do is use the tax system to incentivize the construction of purpose-built rental, incentivize investment in purpose-built rental, which essentially hasn't happened in Canada since about the 1970s, and make sure that we're doing that, and banning foreign buyers who just want to park money here. Housing is for living, not for, to money launder or any of those things. And we need to make sure we are taking swift action in order to make sure that housing is available for people. And one of the things desperately needed is more density, especially on public transit, especially in downtowns, because as Nick says, if we want walkable, communities, we need more people living there. We need more numbers of housing of different types and different price points and more secure for people, so that they know, even if they're renters, that they have security of the housing and they have security to live their lives free from worrying every month if they're going to get evicted. We need a strong plan to address housing, and Canada's recovery plan is that plan.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for that. I want to continue on with a bit of that theme here as we move to the next question. On infrastructure investment, we have to make sure that Canada is well positioned for the future. We need to invest in fixing aging infrastructure like safe roads. Ventilation has become an issue, of course, with COVID, whether it's in hospitals or in workplaces. So we need to set some national goals around building sustainability into our infrastructure and supporting the Western Canada Gateway Trade Initiative. So connecting supply chain, moving goods and services across borders, the funding for that has to be sustainable, it has to be predictable, and it has to align with all the levels of provincial, Indigenous, municipal needs. So to achieve this, would you commit to working on creating an independent advisory body that can align governments at the provincial and municipal level to address infrastructure deficits across Canada? We'll begin with Hannah for 1 minute. Hannah.
Well, I think we've seen over the last 6 years, a challenge in building infrastructure as the Liberals set up an infrastructure bank that, until very recently didn't actually do anything besides pay severance to former board chairs. We need to streamline our processes so that we can actually start getting things built. Infrastructure is incredibly important in Canada. We see, no matter where you are in this country, here on the South Island, that there is a deficit of infrastructure spending. Unfortunately, we have the last 6 years of kind of a black hole of spending, but we can do better and we must do better. Working with provinces, working with the federal government, with municipalities as we split costs, because that's how many projects are funded, to make sure that we are building what is necessary for trade and what is necessary for living and to thrive in our communities. So yes, I support streamlining and making infrastructure spending much more practical and much more urgent, which is something we haven't seen in a while.
Thank you, Hannah. Nick, the floor is yours. 1 minute.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, we really do need to invest heavily in infrastructure in this country. When we're talking about building the vibrant 21st century economy that we want and that we have failed to build so far, a huge part of that revolves around not just safe roads, but investing in our transit future. A huge part of that revolves not around just investing in ventilation, but also in investing in creating carbon neutral buildings. You know, when we decide to take on these large scale infrastructure projects, which we know are going to fight the climate crisis as well as improve standards across the country, part of it does involve setting up these kind of independent partnerships. But really the key is to make sure that what we do is not bog down this process with bureaucracy, but instead make sure that we create a process where we know that the cities, the communities who know what they need best get access to timely funding, get access to resources, and get access to a partner who's committed to working on the same page as they are and not advancing their own political goals when they seek what's best for the community and not what's best for their partisan interests.
Okay. Thank you, Nick, very much. Laurel Collins, floor is yours for 1 minute.
Yeah, and I think, Bruce, you bring up a really good point. We need a federal government that is going to partner with provinces, territories, First Nations, and municipalities to ensure that we have the infrastructure we need. As the, you know, if I am elected again and as your member of parliament, I will advocate for bringing all of these partners to the table and ensuring that we have investments and that communities can afford to build the critical public infrastructure that they need to thrive. And that includes roads, bridges. It also is childcare centers. It's also long-term care centers, community centers, housing. You know, these are the kinds of investments that really grow our economy and support our community members, making life better for all Canadians. We need to invest in our public transit, as well as making sure that life is more convenient and affordable for our citizens.
Thank you, Laurel, very much. And Nikki Mcdonald, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bruce. This is an excellent question for Victoria, because we do have aging infrastructure, but we also have this great opportunity to really green our infrastructure. As we start to rebuild, as we start to make the investments in infrastructure, and there's been, for example, the Green Infrastructure Fund that the Liberals put in place. There is the Infrastructure Bank. There's so much opportunity that's out there. What we need in our community is the kind of federal leadership that will bring the province, the municipalities, First Nations, and community leaders together. And that's the kind of member of parliament that I'm going to be. That's the kind of member of parliament I learned from my dad, who built so much wonderful infrastructure like the waterfront in Toronto, like co-op housing in Toronto. And that's the kind of leadership I learned from Jean Chrétien, who many will agree invested so much in the infrastructure in Canada. And that's, you know, we do need an independent advisory board, but more importantly for Victoria, we need the right leadership in this, as the federal member of parliament, and that's who I'll be. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. We've been talking about infrastructure and the creation of that infrastructure and upgrades that we've been talking about to make things more sustainable, to make things safer even. The construction industry is a key to that, of course, facing a very serious workforce shortage, as so many sectors are right now, hospitality and tourism and tech and all the skills trades. So federal funding for the industry campaign, something like Talent Fits Here, is a good start. That's something that the construction industry is talking about. But to fill the gaps in the workforce that we're seeing right now and have seen for quite some time, will you commit to working with the industry to recruit and train people who see construction and trades as a career of choice, especially among those who are underrated in the community? Nick, I will begin with you for 1 minute, please.
Sure, Bruce, you brought up a work shortage, and you know what? The work shortage right now in Victoria is a very serious issue. But the serious part of this issue is actually related to part of the underlying cause of it, and that's wages. You know, wages in our community have remained so low for so long, not increasing with productivity, not increasing with the cost of living, heck, not even increasing with inflation, that workers have been robbed of that value of their productivity for so long. And what we're seeing right now is finally a reaction and a correction to that, where people are demanding more money to work the jobs that they were working previously before the pandemic. I think it's absolutely incumbent on the federal government to make sure that people working in all industries are paid a living wage for their work. And as we do that, we'll also be able to inspire people to join those same training programs and the programs that bring people into the trades that we need. As we know, we face construction labor shortage in part because of trouble finding workers and in part because of the increased demand for that labor. So between partnering with folks to provide that wages that are livable, that are fair for the community and fair for the productivity of those workers, and also training more workers, we'll be able to get that job done.
Nick, thank you very much for that. Nikki Mcdonald, over to you for a minute.
Well, you know, one of the great resources we have in Victoria is our post-secondary sector. I was just at Camosun talking with students, a great institution. We have Royal Roads, we have UVic, and one of the great pivots that has been happening over the last couple of years is microcredits, a real focus on, you know, helping people get those key credentials they need to get into different industries, to make changes and shifts from one industry to another. And that is a key investment that we're making in the post-secondary sector. And I think that is part of creating that agile and vibrant workforce that we need here in Victoria, as well as, and again, I think Nick's right on about addressing the housing issue. We've got to make sure there's affordable homes for people. And that means building more housing supply and making sure that rents are kept at a rate where people can afford to live in our city and work in our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hannah, over to you for 1 minute.
Thank you so much. You know, as a child of a construction company family, I know all too well the difficulties in finding labor and finding skilled labor, especially now. And we need to, you know, provincial governments have been doing a good job over the years of making, you know, showing that the trades and construction are not, you know, ugly work, but are actually great family supporting jobs, or should be great family supporting jobs. Federal government training, I think, needs to be improved, needs to get better, but I think there's much we can do to make sure that people find professions that they love and that they care about, and that do remunerate them in a way that allows them to live in our communities. I think it's very important that we have a wide range of pathways for people in our society, so that people can chase their dreams and not feel siloed into, well, this is what it's expected, this is what's expected. No, people should have a wide range of opportunities available for them.
Thank you very much. And Laurel for 1 minute.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, we absolutely need to ensure that we have the training available to people. The NDP is committed that we'll guarantee good jobs, training, apprenticeships, and support for local businesses as part of every infrastructure project. We've also committed that we will bring together all levels of government and along with business, along with labor leaders, really to develop a national industrial strategy to build and to enhance our low carbon manufacturing economy, to make sure that Canada is really a leader and is creating the kind of good family sustaining jobs that people need. It's why we also are going to ensure that we have immigration levels and immigration policies that are actually going to meet our labor force needs. We need to recognize people's experience and contributions. I know we're going to get into this a bit later, but we need to work with the provinces to make sure that we improve foreign credential recognition. We need to support workers, we need to support small businesses, and we need to support our communities.
Thank you, Laurel, and thank you all for those questions. Kind of moving along in that same theme somewhat. Our partners at UDI, the Urban Development Institute, have this question to bring forward. Federal funding for housing is great. Delivering the supply is another challenge due to red tape at the municipal level. We have no shortage of municipalities around here. So what can the federal government do, and you as a representative of that government do, to encourage local governments to increase housing supply? And Laurel, I will start with you on that, please, for 1 minute.
Thanks so much, Bruce. You know, I know that we have had our municipalities here in our region asking for funding from this federal government, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer did a report on the Liberals' National Housing Strategy, and they showed how the Liberals announced large amounts of money for their two biggest programs, but actually only spent about half of that. The PBO's scathing report on the National Housing Strategy also showed that it put people in core housing need, it made them worse off. We need a federal government that is going to fund the building of housing adequately and make the important investments in addressing the housing crisis. But they we also need a federal government that's going to be a partner to municipalities. We need to tackle the housing crisis. It is for the people who are unhoused, who are in precarious housing, but also really for everyone across the housing continuum.
Thanks, Laurel. Hannah, over to you for 1 minute.
Thank you so much for the question. There's a huge amount of housing sitting ready to be built all over this country that will help people find places to live that is held back by the gatekeeping of municipal governments. Now, that's municipal and provincial, but the federal government can play an important part here. One of the things that's important in Canada's recovery plan is to require that when the federal government invests in public transit, that there is density requirements around those public transit. So the federal government is going to spend money. It needs to be density requirements around it. And also partnering with provinces and municipalities in order to reduce red tape and get more housing built. Because there is a huge amount of prospective housing that could house people today in our communities that is sitting in years-long red tape bureaucratic processes, and we need to ensure that that housing is unlocked, that investment is unlocked, and that we can both grow our economy and build housing and all work it all with us together.
Thank you, Hannah. Nikki, for 1 minute, you're up.
Well, Bruce, we've seen a lot of challenges from this council in the city of Victoria. And, Laurel was part of the Together Victoria crowd when she was elected, and they've certainly been a barrier to a lot of good development, good initiative here in the city of Victoria. And so that is one reason I'm running, frankly, as a federal member of parliament, because it's going to take a light leadership. It's going to take a strength of leadership at the federal level, working with the provinces to help us overcome some of the challenges of, frankly, a dysfunctional city of Victoria Council. That the Liberal government has put together what they call the Housing Accelerator Fund. And that fund is intended to support the initiative that I'm talking about, which is to work where the federal government works with municipalities to help them address some of the barriers that they're creating now to building housing. And so that's a key reason I'm running here. We need to take a regional approach to building housing in our community. We need to overcome some of the dysfunction of having 13 municipalities, and we need federal leadership on this issue.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. And we'll wrap up this question with you, Nick, for 1 minute. Go.
Thanks, Bruce. We've got 3 municipalities here that cover the riding of Victoria, though most people who live in this riding live in the city of Victoria proper. What we need is not a federal member of parliament who's going to sling mud at the other levels of jurisdiction here. What we need is someone who's going to sit down on the same side of the table and play on the same team, because at the end of the day, it's not about blaming other jurisdictions for not getting the job done. When that ball drops, it drops at our feet. And Victorians are the ones who end up footing the bill for not having adequate affordable housing. No one cares if it was the municipality, the provincial government, or the federal government's fault that housing didn't get built. All they care about is that it's not there. So at the end of the day, what we need is a federal government that's going to show leadership by playing ball, by working on the same team as the province and the municipality to get the job done. And we can do that, but it's going to take building those relationships, maintaining and repairing the ones that are being threatened and are being broken right now, and working together with our municipal and provincial partners to make those investments and to use those federal dollars to make sure that the job gets done. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick, very much. All right. We haven't talked about taxes a whole lot yet. Taxes is fun. Let's talk about taxes now. Significant issue affecting the affordability in this region for workers is the lack of appropriate rental housing. Developers currently who build and sell property are taxed higher than those who build and rent property. So would you support a review of the tax policies with respect to landlords of purpose-built rental properties that could have treated them like other businesses? And Nikki, why don't we begin with you?
I'm so sorry, Bruce. I think my it just cut out for the last portion of your sentence. Do you mind repeating the last bit?
Oh, okay. Just the question part? Yeah, the question is, would you support a review of the tax policies with respect to landlords of purpose-built rental properties that could have treated them like other businesses? Okay, Nikki, please go ahead.
One of the programs that we're introducing in our platform is a rent-to-own program, where we want to work with landlords, both private sector landlords, NGOs landlords, and other kind of landlords, to assist people who, particularly those, like if you think of people in James Bay, many of who've lived in their apartments for over 20 years. Imagine if they could have worked with their landlord for the rent that they pay would help them eventually begin to own their apartment building, their apartment. So that's just one example of where we want to work with landlords. We want to make sure that the landlords are being encouraged to build affordable and accessible housing. Another example here in the city of Victoria is that we provided a loan to Town Lines to build the Hudson apartments, which is affordable and accessible housing that's now being built around the Hudson Bay area. So we've been working very closely with landlords to help build housing. We work with landlords to help address the impact of the COVID on small business, and we'll continue to do so. At the same time, we want to ensure
Thanks, Nikki. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there and move along. We'll probably loop back on this in the future, though. Nick, over to you for 1 minute, please.
Thanks, Bruce. Didn't hear from our first candidate. I honestly don't know exactly the details of the tax policy for landlords for purpose-built rental properties. But what I will tell you is that we have a lot of different kinds of purpose-built rental here, some of which is luxury, some of which is affordable, some of which is a combination. What we need to be prioritizing is tax reform for rental housing that's going to be built that meets strict requirements for affordability. And that affordability is 30% of income, according to the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. What we need is a significant number of affordable units being built in every new rental building. Because what we do know is that when people of various backgrounds on that continuum of housing live together, that lifts a rising tide that is going to lift all of the boats of the welfare of all of those people who live in that community. It keeps folks connected and it keeps folks engaged in what's going on at all levels of their community. And that's a key element for how we address housing and housing affordability in this community. The rent-to-own program proposed by the Liberals is only going to help a very small number of folks who are just on the cusp of being able to attain housing, but it's not going to help the folks who are renting or who are looking, like a lot of folks in my generation, that they'll never be able to own a home, that they'll be
Thanks,
renters
Nick.
for life.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Laurel, over to you for a minute.
On changing some of the tax policies to ensure that we are actually building housing that people can afford. The NDP is committed to lifting the GST on new builds that meet strict affordability criteria. And when we're talking about affordability criteria, we're using the CMHC's definition. We want to make sure that people are not spending more than 30% of their income on their housing. We want to make sure that we are prompting new builds. We want to build, also invest public dollars in building 500,000 new affordable homes, and also ensuring renters get a break with a $5,000 subsidy. So supporting renters as well. You know, it is so essential that we build, renovate, and preserve our existing housing. We are in a housing crisis, and just because the Liberals haven't been able to make a dent in the housing crisis, it doesn't mean it's not possible. We need real action on housing.
Thank you, Laurel. And Hannah, to wrap this one up. Hannah, please go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Absolutely, we need to review the tax system. We need to change it. Because if you look around our community, you'll notice that a lot of purpose-built rental buildings built up until about the 1970s, and then nothing. And since then, it's been all condos. And a big, major reason for that is that the tax incentives were changed then to get rid of many of the incentives to build purpose-built rental and then so the incentives became to build for sale condos and stratas. We need to change that so that we're incentivizing purpose-built rental, because that's a big gap in our community. That's a big gap in the terms of housing we need. And I'd just like to say, a rent-to-own program I don't really think is a solution, because ultimately, if it's a purpose-built rental building or it's an apartment building, if someone is rent-to-own, is the intention to turn the building into a strata? I'm not really understood how that would work, or I don't think someone renting a basement suite in James Bay would necessarily want to sell a portion of their home. So what we need to do is build more rental housing, make sure the tax system is set up in such a way as we incentivize the housing we need, which is more affordable rental housing.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for all those answers to all the candidates. We're going to move into tourism recovery. That's been a big deal for us. I mean, we've seen decimation in this sector as well. We're renowned, of course, for the tourism experience here. Our community partners in this event and on an ongoing basis in this recovery are Destination Greater Victoria and the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority. So some questions have come forward from them for you candidates to help this sector hardest hit by COVID. I'm going to combine a couple of questions into one here. First of all, will candidates commit to continuing the wage and rent subsidies based on lost revenue until at least next April, when tourism businesses will hopefully be back to pre-pandemic operations? In other words, to see them through this period of time in what would normally be their shoulder season. And will candidates commit to winding down benefit programs such as enhanced EI that replaced the CERB? So those two things together, let's take a minute and do that. And Hannah, will begin with you for 1 minute.
As we come out of the COVID pandemic, we need to make sure that we are encouraging business development and encouraging hiring. And that's why the Conservative Party has put in one of our platform planks is that job hiring, job surge, to pay for 25% of wages of new hires, which will help, bring on new people on board and bring help grow businesses and help businesses that are trying to survive. In terms of the CERB, I know it is ending. I think that it is ending very shortly. And so we do need to make sure that there are supports in place for people, but that also that we are shifting to a recovery lens and shifting to looking at how we can make sure that businesses survive this period and start to grow, and so they can succeed and prosper in the future. And I think that that would be something that I'm very focused on.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Laurel, over to you for a minute.
Thanks so much. And we need to support our hard-hit tourism industry. We've been pushing for targeted, specific supports for the tourism industry. And we also need to make sure that small businesses continue to get the support that has really helped them weather the storm. And so the wage subsidy, the rental subsidies must continue until small businesses are able to fully reopen and get back up and running. We also are going to ensure that we help small businesses get people back to work. We'll put in place a long-term hiring bonus to pay the employer portion of EI and CPP for new or rehired staff and really support our tourism sector here in Victoria. We are going to continue to support people through the pandemic, individuals as well. If there are individuals who are continuing to need EI support and CRB support, we've been pushing to continue to support them, and at the same time continue to support our small businesses that are the lifeblood of our economy.
Thank you, Laurel. Nikki, over to you.
Sure. And Bruce, I know you and Destination Victoria and others have been at the forefront of really advocating to the federal government for support for the tourism industry, and we're successful. In fact, there's been a significant amount of support that the Liberal government put in place to help the tourism sector through this pandemic. And we're planning to continue that. So up to 75% of the expenses for wages and for business rent support for tourism industry will continue throughout this winter, recognizing that indeed our sector in Victoria, we've lost a season. And so that's to help us get through the season. We're also investing in 28,000 new work opportunities for young people. This is through training, through internships and job support. And these will be critical folks that will be able to come and fill the necessary gaps that we've got in our sector. In terms of EI, if there's one thing we've learned through this pandemic is that our EI system needs to be looked at again. Right now, it's based on an old way of working, and it needs to reflect a new way of working. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nikki, very much. And Nick, to wrap up this part.
Absolutely. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. I think that's something that gets lost in these conversations here, that absolutely these supports, which were originally agreed to universally by parties at the start of the pandemic, must continue until we're done and we've seen this through. And you know what? Globally, that could be quite a while. But in Canada, we know that we're not out of the woods yet. We've got to keep working at it, and we've got to keep these supports in place. As far as transitioning away from those enhanced benefit programs, what we need actually now is not low wage jobs for people. What we need is jobs that pay living wages. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we're guaranteeing that livable income for everyone. Whether part of that includes basic income, part of that includes making sure that jobs pay living wages. You know, it's time that we had a little bit of a reckoning with our society that said that it's okay to pay certain young folks an extremely low wage job because they're just getting started. And at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to make sure that people are put first, and that those employees and their business owners in that sector know that what we need is everyone to have a living wage job, because when they have that money stays in our community. That philosophy of money really promotes economic growth and development, and we'll be able to move forward and have a vibrant economy here again in Victoria.
Thanks, Nick, very much. I want to move into some specific properties, if you will, elements here in this Victoria riding. We want to ask right now about your party and your opinion on federal funding for three particular projects. Those three in particular are the Belleville Terminal, the Royal BC Museum, and a renewal and expansion of the Victoria Conference Centre, all of which are crucial to our tourism and the downtown dynamic in this riding of Victoria. So let's talk about that. And Nick, I'll begin with you for 1 minute. And go.
So I was just writing those down.
Okay.
So we've got the Belleville Terminal, the Royal BC Museum, and the Victoria Conference Centre.
Correct.
As long as I've lived in Victoria, and I've lived here my whole life, those have all been mainstays of our downtown core. You know, I mean, going to the Royal BC Museum as a kid and seeing the exhibits was something that I was always looking forward to doing. And knowing that creating a vibrant tourism industry means that we need to have the terminal, the conference center, the museum working at sort of full steam ahead, means that we know that, you know, the city of Victoria, the province of British Columbia can't make that full investment themselves. But what we do know is that this is the exact kind of good investment that government can make in promoting a project that's moving forward. And what we know is that when we make that investment, we're going to get a return on it. And that return is going to come in the way of tax dollars. The return is going to come in the way of economic growth. The return is going to come in the way of making sure that when we make that investment, it's environmentally and socially responsible. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Nick, very much. Laurel, over to you.
Yeah, I will continue to push for federal funding for these projects. And I think we need to promote jobs, economic growth, trade, tourism, and these projects are vital to that. I think about the Belleville Terminal, and you know, we have a long way to go to make this the kind of portal to Victoria that it could be, and really kind of Canada's Pacific gateway. And our entire country benefits when we invest in the infrastructure that we need, and we put public dollars to really address our local needs, but also our regional needs as well.
Thank you very much. Nick. Sorry, Nikki. Sorry, Nikki, go ahead.
That's okay. So thank you. Yeah, these are our three great projects. With the Belleville Terminal, I think it's essential if we're going to really continue to expand the Cascadia tourism framework, which is to really see tourists coming up and down the coastline. Belleville Terminal is the centerpiece for that. And I think we can make a good pitch for it. So I'm happy to be part of that. Particularly the conference center, you know, years ago, when I was at Ocean Networks Canada, we looked at taking over some of the downtown core area to house the Ocean Networks Canada. And then, even then, we learned how tight the conference facilities were, because the location we were looking at was used as the expansion area for that. What a great place we are for January, February to have conferences come to fill that shoulder season between other kinds of tourism. I think that's essential. With Royal BC Museum, I have to admit a little bit of conflict here. I'm part of the Art Gallery board. As you know, we're also looking at a potential expansion in the arts innovation sector. So I think we need a good comprehensive discussion in our community about supporting all the arts.
Thanks, Nikki. We'll stop you there and move on for Hannah's remarks. Hannah, please.
Thank you. I think one of the most important jobs of an MP is to be the champion for the priorities of a community and the priorities of a region to the federal government. And I think that I would be happy to champion the priorities of Victoria and also the entire riding to the federal government to make sure we're seeing the infrastructure investment that we need. We saw over the last year and a half the negative impacts economically and socially from obviously very few travelers. And so looking at things like the Belleville Terminal, bringing more people into our wonderful communities to enjoy themselves and contribute to our local economy is incredibly important. These projects are very important. I support them fully, and I think that I would be happy to champion them in Ottawa.
Thank you very much. Another specific project here for the core of the city, but it addresses climate and a number of other ancillary opportunities. Would you commit to working with the Harbour Authority to help ensure the plan to bring shore power to Ogden Point is properly funded by government? Shore power at Ogden Point. Nikki, let's begin with you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been talking with Ian and the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority about this for 2 years. I was disappointed that there wasn't an application made to the Green Infrastructure Fund. I thought that would have been a good opportunity to really get some funding for shore power. But I do want to say one thing, which is I've talked to the cruise ship industry as well. And I've asked them whether the cruise ship industry would be willing to partner with federal funds to put shore power in Ogden Point, and they said they would. So I believe that it's really an opportunity to build some partnership here between the cruise ship industry as well as putting in federal and provincial funding for shore power. Thank you, Bruce.
Great, thank you. Hannah, shore power.
Thank you. The idea of shore power is obviously great in principle, and we need to examine it closely and especially look at best practices all over the world. But we need to also make sure that when we're doing it, that it's going to be utilized and that we have an effective environmental protection system in place to make sure that when we spend the money, it's for the right reasons. Looking at best practices, figuring out what works in other places, specifically in terms of cruise ships, aligning our dumping policies with Alaska to make sure that Canadian waters aren't the dumping ground of the industry. These are all important things to look at. And I'll be happy to look at them and happy to work with the surrounding communities in James Bay and with the Harbour Authority to make sure that we are doing the right things for the right reasons and making the best environmental and economic impact.
Thank you. Laurel.
Yeah, we need to push for shore power, and I agree with Nikki in terms of we need both the cruise industry and the federal government to really partner to ensure that we are moving forward on shore power. I have sat down with ministers to push for environmental protection, to push for shore power, to talk about our cruise industry. I've sat down with the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority, and really we have an opportunity to move to a more sustainable model to lessen the impacts on our community while still supporting our tourism and the kind of vital economic driver that this cruise ship industry brings. And so I will continue to be pushing for this. I'll also be continuing to push for strong regulations to protect our water and our air from pollution. We need to strengthen our laws in Canada to really make sure that we protect our vital ocean ecosystems.
Thank you. And Nick, to wrap this one up.
Yeah, absolutely. Shore power is an essential element of greening up one of Victoria's dirtiest industries. It's not the only part that's important. I mean, yeah, of course we don't want generators running on the docks and running on bunker fuels off our coast, but we need to make sure it's not just that the ships are being somewhat environmentally responsible when they're in port. They also must be environmentally responsible in our waters. So yeah, we haven't done enough work yet but there's more work to be done. And I have a lot of confidence in our federal government, in our provincial governments, and in the cruise ship industry to be able to work together on this, knowing at the same time that it's important that we carry a definitive stick and a deadline. This does have to get done. We also need to eliminate the use of high sulfides in the fuels that the cruise ship industry is using. We also know we must ensure that we're, again, bringing that stick to bring best practices, because we can't expect that an industry like the cruise industry, which operates with impunity almost globally, be allowed to set its own rules for environmental and social governance. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I want to talk about reconciliation. This year has been one where issues have come forward. Things that we knew to be fact were proven to be finally a fact with the events of the burial grounds and things at residential schools. September 30th is coming up, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. How will you and your party commit to working with First Nation-owned businesses, with First Nations and Indigenous entrepreneurs to help them access the financing that is not possible in the past, largely due to the confines of the Indian Act? Laurel, I'll begin with you.
Thanks for bringing up this topic. It has been essential that we have real action on reconciliation for decades. And now with the discovery of unmarked graves, I think across Canada, this has been brought to the forefront. And it, for Indigenous communities and Indigenous people, this has been an ongoing frustration with our federal government, the lack of real action on reconciliation. And I think it is re-traumatizing to, each discovery. But to address your specific question, we need a federal government that is going to partner with First Nations communities, that is going to invest the money required to really promote and support Indigenous resurgence and Indigenous entrepreneurs. We are committed to actually investing both in First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, but also in urban Indigenous folks, and ensuring that we provide the training and opportunity to Indigenous people across Canada.
You're muted, Bruce.
Story of my life. Thank you, Laurel. Nikki, over to you for this one.
Sure. Specifically dealing with in terms of the acceleration of economic opportunities for Indigenous people. We are putting in place an Aboriginal Accelerator Fund, which will be used to help support both on-reserve and off-reserve economic opportunities, such like Christina Clark at Songhees is doing a tremendous job at identifying opportunities. The fundamental change that the Liberals put in place since 2015 is the passage of the UN UNDRIP, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And why this is so important is that becomes the covenant that we look at all federal programs and all federal policies to make sure that they are inclusive for Indigenous people. And that includes looking at eligibility criteria being used by the Business Development Bank, the Export Development Bank, and other programs that we have in place that support the development of business in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hannah.
I think the discoveries of the last year are a somber reminder for all of us of the horrors and harmful effects of residential schools and the trauma that continues to this day for so many people. We need, when we look at investment or entrepreneurship and all these things, as you asked, the barriers, we need to make sure that we are not just doing things because it's the way we're done. We need to make sure that we are doing things in a better way as we advance the path of reconciliation. So what are the barriers for Indigenous people acquiring investment and requiring investment in their business opportunities? Let's take down those barriers. Let's figure out ways let's listen to communities, and let's figure out ways in order to unlock the potential, because there is so much potential for prosperity for all of us. And my commitment as an MP is to listen to Indigenous nations and Indigenous people and work together to alleviate barriers to make sure that they can achieve the prosperity that has been so long eluded.
Thanks, Hannah. Nick, final word to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The past months in particular, these discoveries of unmarked graves have been a serious reminder of the amount of work that's left to be done in implementing the 94 calls to action. I'm going to highlight in this moment call to action number 92 on business and reconciliation. The fortunate part here is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've been given clear instructions here that there has been serious racism that has resulted in a wealth gap, a wage gap, and an income gap for Indigenous folks in this country. We need to commit to meaningful consultation, obtaining the free, prior, and informed consent for future projects that affect Indigenous peoples. We have to ensure that these Indigenous peoples also have that same equitable access to jobs and training. We talk about ensuring a quality education as a human right that is extended through this program. And we have to make sure that there's education on the history of how these projects will influence the future of these Indigenous communities. It's so important that we take this time to implement Call to Action 92, and that we really take that meaningful moment to address this.
Thanks, Nick, very much. We have come to the conclusion of our session, so thank you all for your very thoughtful remarks and comments today. We're going to now give you 1 minute for closing remarks, and we will introduce you in the reverse order of what we did at the beginning of the session today. So for 1 minute closing remarks, Hannah Hodson, Conservative Party of Canada. Hannah.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. This is an important opportunity to speak to local people in our riding, and specifically local employers and business owners who have had a very tough year and a half. I think we all know that, and we need to make sure that government continues to support and we figure out ways to grow and the economy and figure out ways to bring back the prosperity, and while protecting and ensuring that we keep the character and uniqueness of our communities here on the South Island. I think it's a special place in Canada, certainly. And so thank you so much for having me. I'm here to talk and speak to anyone who has any questions for me. And I have to say this, on September 20th, please vote Hannah Hodson, vote Conservative. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. Closing remarks, Nikki Mcdonald, Liberal Party of Canada.
Sure, thank you, Bruce. This pandemic, this past 2 years has shown us that it matters. Government matters, who you elect matters, the values of the people you elect matter. And of all the candidates, I'm the only one who's worked in business, academia, government, who brings that wealth of experience and that expertise to really represent Victoria. So just to duplicate a little bit from Hannah, on this September 20th, please vote for Nikki Mcdonald, vote Liberal. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki, very much. Nick Lawton, Green Party of Canada.
Bruce, I think we're all going to make an appeal for your vote today. So I'll start it by saying that your vote for the Green Party, your vote for Nick, is a vote for your future. What we need now is meaningful change more than ever, as people recognize that we're not moving in the right direction on the key issues affecting us here today. What we need is to vote for action, not empty words and broken promises. A decade of Harper, 6 years of Trudeau, and a couple of years of the NDP in minority have given us almost nothing in the progress that we need for our future. What we need now is to guarantee basic rights to every single person: economic, health, environmental, and social and racial justice. Vote Green in this election to demand real action from your representative in Ottawa. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Nick, thanks very much. And closing remarks, Laurel Collins, New Democratic Party.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for organizing. And 2 years ago, the people of Victoria sent me to Ottawa to fight for this community, to fight for our future. And that is what I have been doing every single day, fighting to get more supports to the families, to the small businesses who need it, to get bold investments in housing. And I've been fighting for real action on the climate crisis. And I'm so proud of the plan that Jagmeet and our NDP team has put forward and what we've accomplished over the past 2 years. Increasing COVID relief benefits for the people who need it, fighting also, and we need to keep fighting to support the people who have fallen through the cracks, startups. I also led the negotiations on the net zero climate accountability bill. And we are fighting for the future for our children and our grandchildren. And so I'm asking for your support to send me back to Ottawa so I can keep fighting for you, for our community, and for a recovery that works for everyone.
Thank you, Laurel. And thank you to all of you, not only for your time today, but for the commitment you've made to stand for election. This has sometimes a bit of a thankless experience. You have to put up with a lot of stuff from a lot of people who may or may not agree with what you do, but it's a crucial part of our democracy to have people like you step up and stand for office. So thank you very much for your commitment to that and for joining us here today. We very much appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching us on the recording, thank you for doing that too. I'm Bruce Williams on behalf of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Have a great day.
Thank you.